June 2, 2026, 11 banks in Macau settled a trade outside the US dollar system for the first time. No SWIFT, no correspondent bank in the US. The transaction cleared without touching American infrastructure entirely. But Saudi Arabia just joined this platform. And they're not the only one. I'm David, and this is how the dollar's grip begins to slip. That switch in Macau wasn't ceremonial. It was the first real test of mBridge running live. On June 2nd, the Monetary Authority of Macau connected 11 commercial banks and settled a trade. No SWIFT, no correspondent bank in the US. The transaction cleared without touching American infrastructure entirely. This matters because SWIFT has been the backbone of global finance for 60 years. Every major currency transaction, dollars, euros, yen, passes through it. The US can watch every transfer. The US can freeze any account. That power is how sanctions work. It's how the West weaponizes money. mBridge changes that calculation. 5 central banks built it: China, the UAE, Thailand, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia. But now Macau proves it's real. Not a test. Live settlements, new members signing up. Proof you can move billions without SWIFT, without the dollar, without asking Washington's permission. That's what terrifies policymakers in Washington. Because a major financial hub just showed the entire world there's an alternative. And every central banker is doing the same calculation. What is this thing exactly? And how does it work? To understand why everyone's watching, you need to understand what mBridge actually is. It's not a currency, it's a settlement layer, a direct connection between central banks that lets them move money without using intermediate banks in New York. Here's how the old way works. Chinese exporters sells to Saudi Arabia. Money converts to dollars at a bank in New York, gets sent through SWIFT to Riyadh, converts back to reals. 3 middlemen, 3 fees, 3 chances for the US to see what happened. mBridge cuts them all out. Trade settles directly between central banks in their own currencies. No New York bank, no SWIFT, no observation point, just 2 countries moving money to each other. But it only works if both sides have a CBDC, a digitized version of their currency plugged into the network. Which is the hard part. It requires trust. It requires giving up some control, and it means your currency is now visible to the other members of the platform. That's why only certain countries can join. Not because the technology is complicated, because you have to be willing to let other central banks see your transactions in real time. Most countries aren't ready for that. So which countries decided that transparency was worth the risk? Saudi Arabia walked in first. June 2024, right when the platform launched. The Saudi Central Bank, SEMA, signed on as the 5th founding member. Why? Because oil is Saudi Arabia's entire economy. And oil pricing is where America holds leverage. Oil is priced in dollars. Oil payments flow through New York banks, get sanctioned, and your revenue stops cold. Now China is Saudi Arabia's biggest customer. In 2024, Saudi oil exports to China hit $46 billion, over 15% of everything they sell. And China keeps pushing. Price this in renminbi. Use our payment systems. Stop needing the dollar. Saudi Arabia said no. They held the line. Their currency peg to the dollar stays firm. 3.75 rials per dollar, the same rate since 1986. They're not switching. They're not abandoning Washington. But then they joined mBridge anyway. So what are they really doing? The answer is riskier than either loyalty or betrayal. Saudi Arabia is hedging, building an alternative, keeping their options open. And that calculation is spreading. Because if Saudi Arabia sees value in an exit-door, every other oil exporter is watching to see how long the dollar can hold on. Here's what Saudi Arabia's hedging strategy actually looks like. The kingdom keeps its dollar peg locked. that protects oil export revenue and keeps the US close. But they also joined mBridge. They can now route trade to China, settle in their own currencies, and bypass American banks entirely. It's not betrayal, it's an escape hatch. Saudi Arabia doesn't plan to use it, but they're building it. Why? Because sanctions keep getting sharper. The US has cut Iran, Russia, North Korea out of the dollar system entirely. Saudi Arabia sees that. Their $46 billion annual oil sales to China need insurance, and the numbers show why. A 10% shift in Saudi oil sales from dollars to mBridge settled trades would move $4 billion a year outside American oversight. Enough to matter. Not enough to crash the dollar, not yet. But enough to prove the exit works. And once one exporter proves it works, everyone copies it. That's the real fear in Washington. Not that Saudi Arabia leaves. That they've shown every oil exporter the blueprint for how to stay profitable while walking to the door. But Saudi Arabia isn't alone. Far from it. Watch the map fill. 31 central banks are now official observers on mBridge. Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Cambodia. ASEAN is in. South Korea, Australia, Turkey, the European Central Bank. A line forming at the door. These aren't members yet. But once they move from observing to live, the dollar loses leverage over a quarter of global trade. So here's the thing about the dollar's position. It's not under threat of collapse, it's under threat of irrelevance. The vulnerability isn't sudden, it's a slow split, a bifurcation. On one side, the old dollar system, Western trade, European commerce, North Atlantic currencies settling in dollars because SWIFT works and New York banks are reliable and sanctions don't apply. On the other side, the new corridors, energy trade between Gulf exporters and China, Southeast Asian supply chains, offshore renminbi liquidity. These routes increasingly clear on mBridge in their own currencies outside the dollar entirely. The dollar doesn't disappear. Dollars don't crash, but they become specialized. Like pound sterling after World War II, still used, still real, but no longer the default for global trade. Instead, you get a multi-currency world. Dollars for the West, renminbi for Asia, dirhams for the Gulf. Slowly, almost invisibly, the world bifurcates, and the dangerous part is that the process looks painless. There's no crisis, no bank run, no obvious moment where everything breaks. Trade flows one way on SWIFT, another way on mBridge. Gradually, the dollar loses reach without anyone noticing it's gone. But America isn't powerless. It's just trapped. The US Treasury hasn't issued an explicit threat against mBridge. No formal warning, no sanction list. Because the moment Treasury says, join mBridge and face consequences, every wavering central banker gets proof the dollar is a trap. The threat becomes the crisis. But implicitly, the warnings are everywhere. In November 2024, OFAC told every foreign bank, if you join Russia's SPFS payment system, we will sanction you. SPFS is Russia's copy of SWIFT. mBridge is China's copy. The message is clear. Join either one, and you're marked. Then, Treasury issued guidance on Iran's teapot refineries, secret processors buying 90% of Iran's sanctioned crude. And Treasury said openly, we will sanction any foreign bank that touches this trade. Who settles those payments? Chinese banks. Who does trade between China's refineries and the Gulf? mBridge's founding members. So Treasury just told the world, participate in mBridge and we might sanction you, without ever saying mBridge's name. It's clever. It's fragile. It's fragile. The moment one major economy decides the threats are hollow, everyone else calls the bluff. But here's the gap nobody's talking about. mBridge works fine for Saudi Arabia and China. They know each other. They don't need perfection, just functionality. But the moment India wants in, the moment Brazil signs up, The moment a G20 economy tries to move all their trade through mBridge instead of SWIFT, the cracks appear. And nobody knows how to fix them. Research shows no published governance frameworks, no dispute protocols, no legal agreement about what happens when transactions fail. Which country has jurisdiction? Whose law applies? What if two central banks disagree? SWIFT answers these questions. It's run by banks under Belgian law. Clear contracts. With mBridge, nobody knows. Central banks are sovereign. They have immunity. They operate under conflicting laws. Add FX convertibility. If you join mBridge and get sanctioned, how do you convert your renminbi back into something the world accepts? The liquidity isn't there. Nobody's sure it will ever be. That exit door Saudi Arabia built might not actually open. And until mBridge solves these problems, governance, law, liquidity, the dollar still has a moat. The question is, how long? For the first time in 80 years, the dollar has real competitors. The dollar isn't collapsing, it's becoming optional. If this story mattered, subscribe and share. I'm David. See you tomorrow.